Hey guys, it's Otti again. I'm sitting here in Oberhausen at ResonanzWerk. Besides me, the band Darker Half. Hi, first of all.
Yeah.
Darker Half are from Australia. We've heard a long way down here just to tour here. We'll talk about this. But first of all, as people maybe don't know who you are as persons and as a band. So, who are you as person and what's your part of the band? Let's start with this.
I'm Simpson. I'm the singer and the lead guitar player, and I started the band in 2003. We've had a few lineup changes, but we've had these guys with us for the last, about 15, 20 years, and a couple of years of each of these guys.
I'm Simpson. I play drums in the band, and I don't do backing vocals tonight because my voice is fucked.
You play guitar for a year?
I played guitar in the band for a couple of years.
Hey guys, I'm Jimmy. I'm the bass player in the band.
Danny Ritz. I joined in 2019, I believe, and lead guitars and backing vocals.
And as you said, you started 2003.
Yeah.
So what was the idea behind this? What was your reason to say, okay, this band has to be more?
Well, I was 15 in 2003, so I was very young.
Okay.
And so this is pre sort of modern internet, and like classic metal isn't particularly big in Australia, so I'd actually never heard anything like it when I first heard like Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, Metallica. Even old Metallica was pretty obscure at that time to my sort of group. So I heard this stuff, and I was playing guitar, kind of like pop punk sort of stuff that was popular in my age group, and I'd kind of got into slightly heavier stuff with stuff like System of a Down when Chop Suey and Toxicity came out, Linkin Park. All those were very big albums when I was sort of 12, 13. But then I had a friend who was a couple of years older who gave me a burnt CD with a mix of the first four Metallica albums, basically all the hits. And I was like, oh, okay, there's a whole nother side to this. And I found like Metallica, Testament, like the big four plus Testament, and then Iron Maiden and Judas Priest. And so originally we started off wanting to do like a thrash band, but then once we found the more classic metal stuff, which again like was like the next stage behind finding the thrash stuff, we kind of started gravitating more towards that traditional heavy metal sound. And then as we've kind of gone on, I think we've kind of developed our own kind of swing on it, like our own spin on the way of doing things, where it's still like steeped in traditional metal and a little bit of thrash, but I think we've kind of got our own thing going now. I don't know, we're getting called prog a lot, but I don't really think we're prog, but I guess we are kind of.
I can only play in 4/4, so I'm not prog.
So you all come from a metal background, or did you do something else?
Well, me and my brother, I don't think we really do come from a metal background in a lot of ways. Like our parents both played in bands through the 70s and 80s in Australia, and that was very much punk rock, like very punk rock, to the point where like my dad hates metal. So even though I was kind of following in the footsteps by doing the rock and roll thing in general, we took a very different path down it. But that being said, he appreciates it a lot more these days.
Yeah, I've been a metalhead since a teenager, but I've been in other bands like that are very much psychedelic rock. So I bring a little bit of that sort of influence, like King Giz and the Lizard Wizard, the Murlocs, and like those sort of bands, which are really, really big in Australia at the moment. So they're like some of my favourite bands. So I've been in other bands previously, like psychedelic rock bands and like really like scum rock bands as well. But I'm really happy to be playing in this band and playing like some really good power metal.
Yeah, I'm a metalhead through and through. It's all my dad's fault. He got me into the first band was Bullet for My Valentine. I think 2009 it would have been. And then yeah, sort of worked my way back like Metallica, Black Sabbath, sort of worked backwards. And then yeah, shortly after I got a guitar, and then just since then been playing guitar in a lot of metal and rock bands.
And only here because you're touring with Jaded Heart and Fireworks. So how did this come up?
Well, us and Jaded Heart share management together. So, you know, it is hard to come over here and tour on your own as an Australian band. So we're lucky we've got a really good like booking agent management over here with a good sort of staple of bands that we can keep coming over and kind of put together some good packages with that, you know, suit each other and go well. But that's basically how it comes about, is that we need to tour to sell the records, and it's fun. And I feel this sort of music, this sort of melodic metal stuff, it's not that it's treated very differently in Australia. Like, we're treated very much as an underground metal band, because most of it's very much heavy metal, and most of the metal scene's very much death metal and a lot of grindcore and a lot of other core. There's not much traditional heavy metal, but it's considered very much on the metal side of things. Where over here, even bands like Jaded Heart seem to be considered a lot more mainstream than they would be in Australia. And that's the same with us. Like, when I talk to people at shows over here, the sort of bands they compare us to are much more mainstream than what we get compared to in Australia. And so I think the whole genre just kind of sits in a slightly different place in Europe than it does in Australia. I honestly don't know why that is, but it's really struck me every time. I think Australia's maybe a little bit more similar to America in some ways, in where everything kind of sits, but it's still different again, because there's the whole kind of Aussie rock thing going on as well, like, AC/DC and everything that kind of branches off that. It's not quite metal, but it's not quite rock either, and there's that bluesiness that we don't really have, where it's like particularly the German stuff, but a lot of the European metal has that classical influence and a bit more bombastic, I suppose, where Australian music in most genres is kind of a little bit more raw and stripped back. So I think what we do definitely plays, it just like fits a bit better over here, where we're always a little out of place in Australia.
Yeah. So your main audience maybe even is here in Europe, you would say?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
So, but
definitely at this point.
Yeah, but I think it's really hard. I talked to Jaded Heart because you have lots of expenses coming here, I would say.
Yeah.
So does this really work out? Does it really, you get break even at least? Or
not really on the tour itself in Europe at the moment, but if we do a decent tour of Australia, when we go back and kind of put it all together as one kind of deal, we can kind of go okay with that. And then when you factor in sales of other stuff, when you put it all together, you can kind of do okay. But it's like, look, it's rough. We definitely need to get bigger over here. Buy our stuff, come to the shows. Because if we can make it get bigger, it won't take much more to flip it over, but we need a little bit more to flip it over,
So you have to just make one step.
Yeah, that kind of one step further, be pulling that next level of a crowd, be able to make ticket prices up. Hopefully, yeah, exactly.
I don't know. I think it will be 100, 200 people watching at first.
Definitely. But that's it. It's all a start. Everything leads to something else. And that's really, the first time we came to Europe, we actually toured through Eastern Europe in the Balkans, and it was atrociously bad, but amazingly fun. We got our record deal in Germany and our management deal in Germany by, having the balls to go to Eastern Europe and then get a 17-hour bus trip to Germany to meet up with all these agents and bookers in person and say, we're worth this, we put in the effort to come here, work with us, we can come back, And I think, understandably, when you email a lot of these people from Australia, they're like, oh, well, are you really going to come? Do you really have the infrastructure to do this? And it's like, we kind of proved that we did, and so, our manager's Lucky Bob had put in a hell of a lot of faith and effort into us to get us over here. This is our 5th time in Europe now, and that's really all to do with having a really good network over here that's really been supportive of helping us play with good bands and come over here, because we've been touring in Europe with bands like Rage, Wynen, Jeff Tate, among others, and so we're lucky to be able to kind of jump the queue on the smaller shows and do a lot of pretty significant stuff. So that's been great.
So let's talk about fun. So what is the most fun being here in Germany and Europe? What is, for example,
the gigs?
Yeah, the gigs are the most fun part. Yeah.
Playing a show every single night. It's fantastic. You can't do that in Australia. You play like a show on Friday night, you play a show on Saturday night, and then you wait another week, and you're like going back to work, and that fucking sucks.
And that's actually the thing, is like, even when the biggest bands tour in Australia, they only really do the capital cities, and there's only 5 capital cities. So it's like, you see the tours in Europe or America, like the 30, 40 day tours of all the countries and stuff, you just can't do that in Australia. There's no way to do that big circuit that just keeps going, and you really need to do there's that certain critical mass of shows that you need to do to start really making it roll, and you just can't do that in Australia. There's no matter how good you are, you have to go overseas. And, it doesn't have to be Europe, it could be America, but you have to go to Europe or America and do something there. And I think the Australian audience, is incredibly good, but also often doesn't pay much attention until you've done something overseas. which has always been historically, long way to the top if you want to rock and roll. That was the thing even with AC/DC back in the day. They had to go to England before anyone cared about them in Australia.
Yes, I'm sure. Many people even think it's an English band.
Yeah.
for some reason, nobody knows why. But we have to talk about releases.
Yep.
So you're 20 years around and 2 albums?
No, we've got 4 albums.
Oh,
Yeah, 4 albums and an EP, or 2 EPs.
okay. So,
But the first two, it's a bit confusing because we released 1 EP and then 2 albums in Australia between 2009 and 2011. And then we got signed to, we made a 3rd album that also had some re-recordings off the first 2 albums. Half of it was new songs, half of it was older songs. And that was meant to come out on Lim Music in Germany. And there was a falling out between our label in Australia and them over here. I actually don't know what happened, so I don't want to go into the details because it had nothing to do with me. But the whole thing basically fell through. And that album eventually got released over here through Fastball Music in 2016. But that was 3 years after the initial Australian release. But then when we released that was kind of what got us our management booking deal over here to start the ball rolling. So for Europe, really, there is only the 2 albums. There's Never Surrender, Classified EP, and If You Only Knew, the most recent album on Massacre Records, which came out right when the pandemic hit.
yeah, it's 2020, I think.
Yeah. March 27th, 2020.
March 27th, 2020. If you only knew.
The worst.
Well, it's funny too because the whole album was about being isolated because we wrote it after we were touring in Europe last time and got home to Australia. It's like, wow, I feel like I'm on the other side of the world, stuck on my own. Wrote this whole album about isolation, then it comes out, the pandemic hits, and it's like, wow, okay.
And you really got isolated in Australia. It was even worse than here. With whole total lockdowns.
And we actually have another album that we've recorded, but it hasn't come out yet, so stay tuned. And we'll actually be playing a song from it on this tour.
So we can reveal something is coming.
Yeah, something's coming. Lots is coming.
We have some idea when next year? Or?
Probably mid next year, I'd say. We're aiming for mid next year. We just want to get a good sort of tour locked in place, and then once we know when we can do the tour, we'll try and base the release around that.
And will it be somehow new in some?
Yeah, I think.
That you tried out, for example, as far as you can talk about it.
Well, I think. Well, this is the first album that Danny and Jimmy have been on, and both of them have contributed quite a bit to the writing, which is a fairly new thing for us. Like, we've had other people in the band write songs before, but generally I've written the majority of the music with arrangement and production with Dom, which obviously changes things as well. But the first 2 albums, I wrote 99% of all of it, and then since then I've always wanted more input from the rest of the band, but different members are different, not everyone really writes. Everyone's got their own abilities, but on this one, with both these guys coming into the band at roughly the same time, considering the pandemic, even though it was actually a year apart, we really wanted on this album to make it, okay, it's a band, I want it to be a band, I don't want it to be my band, I wanted to make it a much more
collaborative.
Yeah, much more collaborative, much more.
Make it more of a band instead of a solo project.
And it was kind of going that way.
I can assume in the past maybe most of the time you have to do with interviews as well, for example. The other ones have been people sitting around. We're part of it, but...
Yeah, kinda. I'm like, it's not even, that was never really a deliberate thing, but it's just kind of part of, we've had, I'm still pretty good friends with most of the people who've been in the band in the past, but we've had one member die in the past as well, and so, and which is obviously awful, and that, when he left the band due to that was Brad Dixon, when he left the band due to a medical condition, which subsequently killed him, that lineup that we had at the time was, doing really well and kind of, definitely by some people in Australia would be considered the classic lineup. And so I really want to make an effort to make this the new classic lineup in that sense, because obviously when something like that happens, it's incredibly sad, but there's nothing really you can do about it, and it's no one's fault. It is what it is. But I genuinely did consider changing the name because he died during the pandemic period when we were kind of inactive because of that. And even though he hadn't been in the band for a few years, I actually considered changing the name of the band. So like, can we even keep it the same thing? But I feel like we're back even stronger than we've ever been at this point. It feels more like a unit than it has been for probably a decade. So it can only go up from here.
So maybe you can tell as well what's your view on the current lineup. So how do you feel it? How do you like it?
Yeah, it feels super good with this new album that we have finished and just waiting to release. It was cool for me to bring some songs to the band, because obviously before I joined I was a fan of the guys. Like my local band back home, we played many shows with them before I joined, so when I got to bring my songs forward, it was almost like what I thought as a band and writing as that band. So it was kind of a cool concept to sort of play with. And I think out of all the songs that I had, 4 of them made the new album, so a lot did get put forward, and it's just exciting for me now. Now I'm putting my input into the band, and yeah, we're going to be playing one of the new ones tonight. So, super fun.
And for me, because Bo's always played the bass on all the records, so just by necessity. So it's been really good to come in and like as a bass player, right, rather than and you're a bass player as well, so like a singer-songwriter sort of perspective. So coming in, playing all those parts, like locking in with certain guitar licks and like doing things that might not have been thought of in previous albums. So it's just really like adding a bit more rather than we'll record the bass now. No, it's like more a part of the overall song structure. Which has been really, really good to do. And,
and he plays with fingers.
Absolutely. None of this pig malarkey.
That's nice. I was like kind of a bass player when I was young. Not really good. I was really bad. But I was in a punk band. I was the only punk musician I knew that played with fingers.
Yeah.
All others.
You're a real bass player.
I tried to, but I wasn't really good. Not really good. But let's come back to you. So let's come to an end in a few minutes, but I had some questions. For example, one question I really think is cool. Who has inspired you in your lives to make music, to be really, to do what you do, but who you are as well?
Well, like obviously there's a ton of bands out there and stuff like that, but in a funny way I actually do have to say my dad, because it was one of my earliest memories was following him on tour when, like, with my mother on a mat when I was like 2-3 years old, and that's like my earliest memories. And so when I think of like people coming over to our house when I was really little, it was all like guys with long hair and leather jackets and those sort of people. So that's always been I didn't even think of it as music, it's just like that's what people are like. Which I know is so weird. It was only when I'm older, like, oh okay, that was actually really weird. But on a more musical sense, I guess, I grew up around music a lot, but much more so around like punk rock and stuff like that. So it was very much, I was into rock and roll and a lot of different sorts of music, but then finding Metallica was the big sort of gateway into finding it all. But then, Iron Maiden and Judas Priest are probably the biggest ones that really made me go, holy shit, there's something more to this, because all that stuff was a bit before my time. It's not stuff that I was actually aware of when I was that age. So when I heard it, to a lot of other people, it's like, oh, this is such old music. But to me, I was like, this is fresh. I'd never heard anything like it. So it didn't sound old and dated. It sounded brand new and different. Because all the metal at that time was System of a Down, Linkin Park, Limp Bizkit, new metal, which, love it or hate it, I'm not judging it, but it's just that it's not like Iron Maiden. And if that's all you've heard and that's what you think heavy metal is, and then you hear Iron Maiden, it's like, what? And so the first time I heard Aces High, it was like, holy shit, a guitar solo can be a riff. What is this sorcery? And I was just hooked instantly. And then when I started singing, I was like, I can sing these songs. And I didn't really think much of it, because how do you know what's good and what's not? But I'd sing songs like Aces High and be able to do the notes and shit. And so you play them and hopefully people like what you do. But because I started when I was really young too, so a lot of our fans were always much older and knew all this stuff, and didn't know why there was a bunch of teenagers playing 80s stuff, especially at that time. So yeah, I think finding that classic metal sound where it was something that I'd never experienced before, and to me it sounded fresh. It didn't sound old, it didn't sound dated, it sounded brand new and something completely different.
I understand what you mean, because often it's like, for example, I've discovered many bands from the 80s, metal and other styles, and if you are not grown up with it, it's new to me.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not that you say, okay, that album was better than this one because they changed their style. You listen to everything at once and you say, oh, this is great, this is a great sound and a great bass sound.
I think honestly that's something that we try to bring across as well, is that no matter how, I guess, if someone wants to call us retro or something, I don't think we're retro, but like if someone wanted to call us that, maybe, but it's like to me, I try to make sure we feel fresh, because like to me, this music is fresh. It isn't old. It's not. Well, I guess it is, but like not to me.
For me, I guess influence. Vo and I are brothers, by the way.
Oh,
so,
yes.
Again, my dad would be another big influence growing up. Just having that musical connection in the family. But drum-wise, I mean, I got to say, Nicker McBrain and Clive Burr are both big influences. So I played in an Iron Maiden tribute band, and I was also the drummer for Paul Di'Anno and the drummer for Blaze Bailey on their Australia-New Zealand run when I was about 21. So that was a big kind of
Step up.
not step up, but that was like foundational in like my growing as a drummer, was playing for those guys. Just because of the careers that they've had and the kind of lessons they were able to pass on to me, like playing for them. But then, I mean, a lot of 70s rock, like I'm really into 70s rock, so guys like Mitch Mitchell from Jimi Hendrix Band, guys like John Densmore from The Doors, really into like Frank Zappa, big Zappa fan. What else? Jethro Tull, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, a lot of that stuff really kind of is, I hope, comes across in my drumming as much as the metal stuff. But then, modern metal like Nevermore and stuff like that, power metal like Nocturnal Rites, kind of got a lot of music behind my playing. So yeah, pretty wide range of influences, I guess. And I mean, a bunch of jazz, that doesn't come through in the metal stuff, but I learnt a lot of jazz when I was going to music school, so that kind of informed my playing too. I still love to improvise just for myself. I don't do it so much in a show, but it's a big part of how I grow my drumming, is just through improvisation.
For me, in terms of bass playing, like Steve Harris, hands down, like finger bass player, and Billy Sheehan. And then when I was in high school, just I wanted to play like live as much as possible. I was in bands in high school and like playing local youth centres and things like that. And then, in an interesting way, like one of the bands that inspired me to play metal. Seeing a couple of, like, I'll go and see some metal shows and there'll be this support act called Darker Half, which I'll see in like 2008, 2009. There was it was like this metal festival called Screamfest in Australia. It was at the Enmore Theatre, and Ed Guy were headlining. So there was Sonata Arctica was there. And Safari, that's right. Yeah, there was so many bands. It was such a good show. And these guys were there as well. It's like just saw them a few times, and it's so good. So yeah, it's like in a way, it's fantastic to like be in the band now, right? Like it's really cool.
Actually, we found Jimmy through one of those like classic rock and roll stories too, because we saw him playing with another band at this local pub in Sydney that me and Dom just go to a lot. We didn't know what was on, we didn't know the band. I'm not sure if Dom had met Jimmy before, but I definitely hadn't. And we watched this band, this fucking bass player doing all this fucking crazy shit. like also, I'm talking more stage show here even than just anything else. I'm like, man, that guy fucking had it going on, like, And so we bought the show, we bought the CD, and we played it back. I like you guys. Oh, cool. And a few years later, when we needed someone, he happened to be around, and it was like, oh, God, I want that. I want that for my band.
So I've done a couple of filling gigs for these guys, like 3 or 4 years ago.
Because our old bass player was totally accident prone.
So yeah, and then then when I got the call up, it's like, yeah, absolutely. I've been mates with Tom for quite a number of years now, and then met these guys through the scene and stuff. So yeah, it's a really solid lineup. Like we're really tight now. It's our second tour together. Like it's just, like more solid than we've ever been.
And that's a similar story with Danny as well, actually, is 'cause we, as he said, we had his band supporting us on a couple of runs back in the day when he was quite young, and I was always keeping an eye on him. Like, he's a bit young now, but if something comes up, like, this guy's someone to watch, and then the right moment came up, and again we had him on a tour we did in Australia with Dragonland, and then just dropped the hey, you want to join on him
On the last show,
at the last show.
drinks with the guys, and Vo comes up to me and goes, while we're partying, I was probably like drunk after 2 beers at this stage, just being 19 or whatever. He's like, do you want to join the band? And I'm like, I don't know. I was like, so off guard. And then I'm like, I'll have to think about it, man. And then, the next day, I think on the drive back, I'm like, let's do it for sure. But yeah, the influence thing for me, like these guys, my dad for sure, because he showed me what rock and metal is. And if it wasn't for him, he bought my first guitar, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. But musically, Metallica, Megadeth, Steve Vai, Yngwie, all the greats. Like, everyone knows who the greats are, it's who we listen to. So super easy answer on that.
So I think we should come to an end because people will come in soon, I think. But maybe you have one last message to audience, to German and English audience as well.
Well, we're always stoked to be back in Europe. We love playing over here. We hope you keep following us. We would love to see you at whatever shows you can get to. We hope you like the music.
So,
No, that's it.
I think that's pretty good.
So, thank you for the cool talk.
No problem.
I hope next time when you come to Germany, we'll talk again.
Definitely.
Thank you.
And you outside, thanks for watching. Listen to the guys, come to the shows. And see you. Bye bye.
Cheers.
Yeah.